name is Jean-Luc Cartran, and I am a biologist by training. I work for an environmental consulting company in Albuquerque called Daniel B. Stevens and Associates, or DBS&A. And DBS&A is now the proponent of the Boston Hill Mine Safeguarding Project. We're just assisting with the environmental documentation and public outreach components of the project. But on behalf of the Abandoned Mine Land Program and the rest of the team, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to attend this public meeting, and thank you also for your interest in this proposed project. So, excuse me, the way we'd like to structure this public meeting is first go over a presentation on the proposed project and see why it is needed, what it entails, and some of the measures that would be taken to minimize or avoid any impacts to Boston Hill. Then, so the presentation shouldn't last more than 20, maybe a little bit more than 20 minutes, but most of the public meeting is for questions and answers and for you all to provide comments, feedback on the proposed project, comments that will be recorded. Before we start on the presentation, I'd like first to let Lloyd Moyola or Mike Thompson of the Abandoned Mine Land Program say a few words about the program and the project. And Lloyd, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, hi, I'm Lloyd Moyola. I'm the environmental manager with the Abandoned Mine Land Program, and I've been with the program for more than 20 years. We have done several mine safeguarding projects in the southwestern part of the state. Boston Hill is unique in that it is within the town limits of Silver City. And so, you know, we're taking a little bit different approach to this project, but I'll go ahead and let Mike speak to the program now. So.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Thompson, and the manager of the program. Right now, we currently have 10 people on our team, and we're part of the New Mexico Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department, a state agency. And we get our funding from a fee on coal production. So every time a ton of coal is brought out of the ground through a surface mine, it's set aside for reclamation across the country. And so that money is consolidated by the federal government, the Office of Surface Mining, Reclamation and Enforcement, and they give us an annual grant. And as the intended purpose of that money is to reclaim and safeguard old coal mines, but they do, as part of the law, allow us to safeguard hard rock abandoned mine openings. And in this case, that's this would be the Boston Hill project. And we've done work in this area in the past, and I believe in the 90s and maybe even the late 80s. And our methodologies have hopefully gotten better over time, are working with the public to get feedback on what they would like to see as part of safeguarding efforts has hopefully improved as well. So James Holland is our NEPA coordinator, and he's on the panel here, and Lloyd, and they'll be consuming this information that you provide us. So hopefully, if you want us to work in Boston Hill, and the way we do it is copacetic with the residents there, because I know it's an important place to the people who live there, and they use it quite a bit. So I'm glad we have so many attendees learning about what our program has to offer, and hopefully the information going back and forth can really make a successful project going forward.
Okay, thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Mike. And before I begin the presentation, I'd like to also give Sandra West, colleague of mine, the opportunity to say a few words. She's interacted with several of you. She's prepared the public meeting for us, and she's advertised the meeting. She's also the more knowledgeable person about the Zoom webinar platform, and so she'll say a few words about the format and ways to communicate during the meeting. Sandra?
Thank you, Jean-Luc. So as you can probably see in the upper left-hand corner, this is being recorded so that it can be available to those who aren't able to attend right at this moment. If you're an attendee, in addition to listening, you can participate by using some of the features at the bottom of your screen. The chat feature can be used for technical support if you're having trouble with something related to the webinar itself. And the Q&A is for questions and comments related to the project. If we don't have a chance to answer any of those, or ones we don't have a chance to answer today, we will make sure to get back to you and follow up with. At the end, we will also have the option to do verbal comments as well as questions. And so we'll use the raise hand option at that point, and then you'll be prompted to unmute, and we'll just go in order. So thank you for joining us.
Sandra, can I just, I forgot to reiterate or point out one particular important partner to this project, and that's the BLM. They own a portion of the property in the center of this, and Chris Teskey is the lead abandoned mine land representative for the BLM in the Southern District and the state. So I'm glad he's able to join us, and I just want to reiterate that they're a very important partner in this whole project.
Thank you, Mike. So we'll introduce the full team in just a couple of minutes. I think it's the fourth slide of the presentation, and what Mike said is very important. This proposed project is in partnership with the BLM. So one of the privileges, for at least for me personally, but also for everyone who's been involved in this project, has been the opportunity to spend time on Boston Hill, this which is described as this green urban space, to experience the trails and the wonderful views of the surrounding landscapes and historic downtown Silver City. And of course, one of the integral components of Boston Hill are all the abandoned mine features, reminding us of the history of the area, the history of mining, which I understand lasted about 100 years. Here's a map of Boston Hill, and it's not because anybody needs to be reminded of where Boston Hill is, but the purpose of this slide is twofold. The first one is to look at some of the boundaries of the proposed project, and those boundaries are represented by the dashed red line around Boston Hill. And then the second, the other purpose of showing this slide is to remind everyone about the jurisdictional boundaries. What we think of as Boston Hill, the larger Boston Hill, is yes, composed primarily in terms of surface area of the Boston Hill open space, which is open for recreation to hikers and bikers and the public in general. But there are other parcels some of which are administered by the BLM, particularly to the south and the east. There's a couple of parcels in the middle, and then in the northeast, where a couple of mines are located. And finally, and this is really important here, there are also private properties that are not open to the public. And so in everything that we talk about tonight, let's remember that although the project area encompass some of these private properties, we're not sending the message that by safeguarding abandoned mine features on private properties, they should become any more accessible to the public. So let's remain sensitive to the fact that those properties are privately owned, and there should not be any trespassing with or without the project. So there are approximately 15,000 abandoned mine features in New Mexico. Some of them, Mike was talking about coal mines. Some of them are abandoned coal mine features, and some of them, as is the case on Boston Hill, are abandoned hard rock mine features. And hard rock mining is the extraction of non-fuel minerals. In either case, there are, on a regular basis, accidents that take place in the Western US. People do fall in vertical shafts, or they get trapped in those shafts. Some of them experience a lack of oxygen, or they break a leg. And unfortunately, in some instances, the accident results in the death of a member of the public. And Mike and Lloyd were talking about the Abandoned Mine Land Program. It is the mission of abandoned mine programs in New Mexico and other states to address the public safety and public health hazards that some of those abandoned mine features pose. So many of Boston Hill's, many, not all, many of Boston Hill's mine features represent safety hazards, and yet they are accessible to the public. And because of that, mine safeguarding is needed to reduce or eliminate safety hazards and protect visitors. One of the important points that we want to convey, though, tonight is that mine safeguarding is 100% compatible with the preservation of recreational opportunities, and it is 100% compatible with the protection of cultural resources and wildlife habitat. So some of our project team have been introduced already. And again, I want to emphasize that DBS&A is just assisting the Abandoned Mine Land Program, which is the proponent of the project in partnership with the Bureau of Land Management. On this Zoom call is Chris Teskey, the Abandoned Mine Land Coordinator out of the Las Cruces Field Office. And the last team member also attending this meeting is Adam Okun, who is an expert archaeologist in New Mexico and the owner of Okun Consulting Solutions, or OCS. And OCS conducted an inventory of all the cultural resources on Boston Hill and produced a very comprehensive report with all of the mine features that are present on Boston Hill. I will let Adam go over 3 of the slides of this presentation, and he'll give us the summary of what he and OCS found. So very quickly, because I think everything will be more obvious when we take a look at actual photographs of safeguarding structures. But here's a list here of some possibilities for in terms of safeguarding structures. We'll take a look at some fences and more specifically weathered steel picket fences that have been installed at Cerritos Hills State Park and other areas. And these fences are proposed in replacement of some of the chain link fences that have been breached already around some of the mine features on Boston Hill. We'll take a look also at gates, which are horizontal bars mounted on vertical columns and are specifically or can be specifically designed to be bat friendly and friendly for small wildlife and have been designed according to the latest industry standards. Some of the structures that we'll look at also are referred to as cupolas. The cupolas are domes on top of vertical structures, such as vertical mine shafts. There are also gated culverts that are possibilities for structural closures of mine openings. There's at least one area that I'm aware of in the southeastern part of Boston Hill where there's a fairly significant mine opening that's flush with the ground. And for mine openings such as that, mesh, high tensile strength steel mesh is a possibility. We'll take a look at some photographs. Also, a possibility is the using some waste piles, rock piles, for backfilling of the mine opening, and finally polyurethane foam plugs. Again, we'll take some a look at some photographs to look at examples. So there's an environmental law which is called the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, and a requirement under NEPA is that federal agencies and their representatives, in many cases state agencies, do provide meaningful opportunities for public participation. There's a trigger for NEPA. Not all projects require or fall under the provisions of NEPA, but those that have a federal nexus do. And what I mean by a federal nexus is that they receive federal funding, and Mike Thompson told us that that's the case with Abandoned Mine Land Program projects, and other triggers or other areas of federal nexus are federal permitting, and then also when a project occurs at least partially on federal lands, which is again the case with this project, since some of the parcels of Boston Hill are administered by the Bureau of Land Management. Another important provision of NEPA is that an analysis of all the potential impacts needs to be conducted. And so that's what's happening with the proposed project for Boston Hill. And the potential impacts that are being analyzed are potential impacts to the natural, but also the human environment. And in NEPA jargon, the environment is divided into resources. And so biological resources are one example, cultural resources, recreation is another important resource, and air quality is with noise levels that can be impacted if there's construction, visual resources or aesthetics are another potential impact. Water quality in this case does not apply, but every facet of the natural and human environment gets analyzed under NEPA for potential impacts in the implementation of a proposed project. So for biological resources, my colleague Julie Katz, who's also on this attending this meeting, and I spent 3 days looking at wildlife and plants and habitat. And the main purpose of our surveys, our general biological surveys, were not to catalog every single plant and every animal that is present or can occur on Boston Hill, although we did some of that. And we did see some really neat things, a great horned owl nest, for example, with fledglings, and a lot of cliff chipmunks and rock squirrels. And although we didn't see any of those species, we know that Boston Hill gets visited by bobcats and coyotes and javelinas. And so Boston Hill is a really special place. But the main purpose of our biological surveys were to evaluate the habitat, potential habitat, and the likelihood of occurrence of what are called special status species. And what I mean by special status species is primarily species that are listed under the Federal Endangered Species Act of 1973. So species that are listed as threatened or endangered or proposed or a candidate. And in some cases for threatened and endangered species, there's designated critical habitat or proposed critical habitat. So our job was to look at Boston Hill and was and still is to determine whether there's habitat for those species. Other special status species include state-listed species. There's another piece of legislation at the state level called the Wildlife Conservation Act. And under the Wildlife Conservation Act, some species can be listed as by the state of New Mexico as endangered or threatened. And finally, in the case of Boston Hill, with some of the land being administered by the Bureau of Land Management, we also need to look at BLM sensitive species. And many of those species can be bats, and there are a couple of bats that are sensitive, that are BLM sensitive on and could occur on Boston Hill. One of them is the spotted bat. And speaking of bats, there was also a survey of bats and bat habitat that was conducted not by us, but by Bat Conservation International, or BCI. The surveys that were conducted by BCI took place primarily in 2018 and 2019 to evaluate both bat occupancy and potential habitat. And remember that slide in the beginning of the presentation when I said that safeguarding of abandoned mines can be compatible with the protection of wildlife? Well, BCI, through their surveys, found the presence of Townsend's big-eared bats in some of the mine features on Boston Hill. And one of the findings of the report that was submitted by BCI is that the Townsend's big-eared bat would actually benefit in the long term from the proposed project as a result of experiencing less human disturbance. And many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with bats and know that bats are very sensitive to human disturbance. There's another consideration, which is the threat that white nose syndrome poses in much of the US. And white nose syndrome is carried by a fungus. And that fungus can stick to the soles of your shoes or to clothing. And so the less visitation there is of some of the mine features where Townsend's big-eared bats are, and the better it is for the long-term occupancy by that species of Boston Hill. There was an additional survey that was prompted by the discovery of sinkholes in 2020 near the High Desert Humane Society building. And that latest survey revealed potential future bat habitat. So I'll now ask Adam Okun to take over for those 3 slides. And Adam, just let me know when to move on to the next slide. Thanks, Adam.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Jean-Luc, and thanks everyone for being here and listening to this presentation today, or this evening, I guess. I'm an archaeologist. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about the cultural resource survey and the historic research that my team's completed for this project as part of DBS&A's team. And I'll just start by saying that from my perspective, cultural resources are always a really essential part of any mine restoration or safeguarding project, because the very features that are going to be safeguarded, these pits or mine shafts that need to be filled because they're dangerous to the public, they usually are historic. And so in our case, the actual features that are the focus of the project are cultural resources themselves. So we are always looking to support the primary goals of the project, which is to keep the public safe, while at the same time we want to preserve some of the rich mining history that's really fundamental to New Mexico and to towns like Silver City. And that's really important on a project like this, where part of the project area is used as open space, and the public's very aware of it and experiences the history of the place. So our study really had 2 main parts. One is historic research, and the other is the on-the-ground documentation. And I'll start with the research part, the historic background part. Really, when we do historic mining research ahead of a project like this, we're looking at how the district was used, when it was used, and how that use changed over time. So we're looking for historic images, historic documents, maybe firsthand accounts, things that will provide some context and background that we might not be aware of just by looking at what's there on the ground today. And so for this project, we were able to obtain historic images from, for example, the Silver City Museum, from the Palace of the Governors. We were able to find some historic documents, annual company reports that gave us a better picture of the history of mining in this district. And you can see a couple examples on the left, a view of Silver City from Boston Hill in the 1880s. Some wagons hauling manganese ore through Boston Hill just after World War I. So these provide some context and some history and background of what this place was like in the past. So I think I'll just go through really quickly. You can see on this slide some of the history of the project area of Boston Hill. Prospecting began there in 1870. But the district really wasn't used intensively until about World War I. And the reason it wasn't is that that initial prospecting wasn't very successful. There wasn't a lot of gold or silver or copper or precious metals in this district. And so when you have this kind of boom of great silver discoveries in Pinos Altos and all these surrounding areas, and you have Silver City booming as this mining boom town, Boston Hill, which is right on the edge of town, really is kind of a backwater. Not much is happening there in the late 1800s. But what it did have, and what would become very important, is iron ore and manganese ore. And these materials are used as fluxing agents to process things like silver, but also they're essential for making steel. And so during World War I, when there's an increase in demand for steel, all of a sudden this becomes very important, and Boston Hill becomes really the leading producer of manganese ore in the state of New Mexico. And it's at this time that some of the well-known features and well-known mines in the district were first developed. So the Legal Tender Mine and the Globe Mine, which are partially on private land at the northern end of the district, kind of over on the hill overlooking the city there, they develop into these really elaborate underground mines in the teens and 20s. And there are these complexes of tunnels and shafts, kind of this classic idea of what we think of as a mine. And that's the first peak of production on Boston Hill. Then the Great Depression hits, there's a hiatus, and mining really doesn't return to the district until the late 30s. And it reaches a second peak again during war times, during World War II, when again there's an increase in demand for steel. And at this time, the district really changes. Instead of these underground mines, now the focus are these giant open pit mines where you can drive trucks right into the mine and extract materials from closer to the surface. And the location of these also changed. Instead of the area around the Legal Tender Mine at the northern end of the district, now the focus really is further to the south in the area of the Adonis Pits, or further to the west, where the largest features really ever created in Boston Hill, the North Pit and the Comanche Pit, are developed. And so we see the shift in how the mining district is used over time. After the war, the district goes into decline. There's some sporadic mining, but it's mostly abandoned as a major mining district by the early 1950s. So the take-home points of that, I guess, is that Boston Hill is kind of a unique district for us to look at, where we often look at these silver, gold, copper mining districts that are focused on precious metals, but this is more of an industrial district, a different type of mining. And also, as you can see, those boom and bust cycles, those peaks of use of the district, they follow, like mining districts often do, the national and international trends. And it's really during the two world wars, when metal was needed for the war effort, that the district reached its peak at those two times. And John-Luc, you can go to the next slide at this point. So that's the historic background, and now I'll talk for a couple minutes about our actual on-the-ground study. The reason we do a survey like this on the ground comes back to something that both Lloyd and Jean-Luc have talked about, and others. This is a federally funded program. This involves federal land, including the BLM. It also involves public municipal land. And just like for NEPA, when you have federal money involved, there are historic preservation laws, just like other environmental laws, that have to be complied with. And probably the most important in this case is the National Historic Preservation Act. And what this law and other laws say is that proponents have to consider and try to identify cultural resources that might be affected by the project. And really, for something like this, the only way to do that is to get on the ground and walk across the landscape and see what kind of features are still there. And so that's kind of the background of why we actually get on the ground and look at what's still there and do a full documentation of the project area. So our survey was conducted over the span of 2 or 3 months, with usually 2 to 4 archaeologists walking all the way across the landscape, 603 acres that, as Jean-Luc has mentioned, includes BLM land, it includes some private land, it includes the open space land that the city administers. And what we did is we just document every single mining feature, from the smallest pit and waste rock pile to the largest open pits to the, to the dramatic mine shafts. We documented all of them. So it's a pretty tedious process. As you can see here, we documented 2,821 total historic features, artifacts and artifact concentrations as well. And really the small features, even though the large pits are the most dramatic things on the landscape out there, the small features were the most common. So we documented 1,158 waste rock piles, nearly 800 prospect pits, also over 250 large open pits, 46 mine shafts, 42 adits. I won't get into all the numbers and bore you to death, but a ton of different feature types that are out there, from ramps, roads, trenches, railroad grade segments, rock walls, structure foundation, mine claim cairns, a whole suite of mining features on the landscape. And if you look at that map in the bottom left, I don't expect that you'll be able to see all the detail on this, but it gives you the idea that really the whole area of Boston Hill is covered with historic mining features. From the largest ones to the smallest ones, really the entire landscape is full of mining features. One interesting thing about this landscape that I'll mention before I pass it back in a minute is that we really didn't find, one thing we didn't find, or things we didn't find, are houses or tent platforms, residential structures. And even though there are some artifacts, there aren't that many. And that's an interesting part of the Boston Hill district, is people really were never living here. This was really a commuter district, we would call it. People are living in Silver City or surrounding communities, and they're really going to work as miners on Boston Hill. So we don't see tent camps and things like that. Jean-Luc, if you want to move to the next slide. So before I sign off here, I'll just show a few more examples of some historic mining features in Boston Hill. On the upper left, you can see some really large waste rock platforms. These often surround the large open pits. You can see access ramps that are accessing the platforms. On the lower left are some entrances to the legal tender mine. You can see an explosive shed there, one of the few kind of intact little structures in the district. And on the bottom right is the Comanche pit. And so these are the kind of things we see and document in a survey of a mining district like this. And as Jean-Luc said, we have submitted a very large, probably too long report to the AML program, and we're still working with them on ongoing efforts and consultation. And the AML will be working to preserve significant features wherever is feasible. And I'll just close by coming back to what I said at the beginning. It's that balance between the goal of the project, which is to keep the public safe, and also to balance that with preserving some of these really important features that illustrate the mining history of Boston Hill and of the Silver City area. And with that, I will pass it back to Jean-Luc for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Adam. So we've just covered biological resources and cultural resources, and going back to the natural and human environment that needs to be considered under NEPA. There are a couple of resources that I still want to mention because they are important in the case of Boston Hill. All of these resources are presented and discussed in a document that will be released to the public and referred to as an environmental assessment. And that environmental assessment will be, as it gets released, there will be a 30-day public comment period for all of you to provide comments if you wish on the project and the analysis of impacts and its findings. In terms of recreation, again, it is good to remember that the majority of the Boston Hill district is owned by the town of Silver City for recreation. Most of the Boston Hill mining district, but not all of it. And so, for example, most of the legal tender mine area is on private property that is not open to recreation. And so safeguarding measures on private property that would result in lesser accessibility to the public would therefore have no negative effects on recreation, because there should be no recreation on private property. There should be no trespassing. Other areas that are proposed for safeguarding that are open to the public for recreation would arguably experience a long-term benefit by enhancing safety for hikers, bikers, and other visitors to the public. Then there's also aesthetics, or again, what is referred to under NEPA as visual resources. And there are a few important points here again that need to be made. And the first one is a general point, which is that changes resulting from project implementation on Boston Hill would conform as much as possible to the predominant natural features of the surrounding landscape. And that this will become obvious in a minute when we look at some photos. The Abandoned Mine Land Program is seeking minimization of the impact of the project through the use of material types that will blend in with the surrounding landscape. Also, it is the goal of the Abandoned Mine Land Program to carefully choose the locations where new safeguarding measures are implemented. With what Adam was talking about, more than 2,000 abandoned mine features, there's no question of, or no talk of safeguarding each and every single mine feature. Only a small proportion of them represent a safety hazard. And so the Abandoned Mine Land Program is just looking at safeguarding those measures in the right locations. Also important is the fact that the priority would be to reinforce and repair some existing safeguarding structures for minimal to no change to the existing landscape. So first, reinforce and repair what already exists on Boston Hill before installing new safeguarding structure. And finally, another goal of the AML is to minimize construction disturbance, and there would be no use of the heaviest machinery for this project. And the other thing is that the project could be phased so that at any time during the life of the project, there would be minimal ground disturbance. So let's look at examples of what's been done in other places in New Mexico. And first, we'll take a look at some of the fences that I mentioned earlier, referred to as weathered steel picket fences. There's an example on the left of a fence around a mine opening involving weathered steel for blending in with the ground and some of the surrounding topography. On the right, a little bit of a closer look at a weathered steel picket fence which is rust colored. The reason why it blends it better, definitely much better than chain link fences. Here's here are more photographs of the weathered steel picket fences. A close-up of one such picket fence on the left, and the rust color that is aesthetically pleasing and has been used at, for example, at Cerrillos Hill State Park on the right hand side, and again it blends in really nicely with the ground and some of the surrounding hills. The picket fence on the right is around a partially filled shallow shaft. Some more closures that are being discussed, proposed for Boston Hill. On the left, the bat cupola. A cupola, again, is a dome on a structure such as a vertical shaft. And on the left here, there's one which is stepped into the hillside for a less visually obtrusive, more aesthetically pleasing feature. On the right hand side of the slide is a culvert, referred to as rock bulkheaded culvert with a bat-friendly gate. And around the gate is cemented rock work to assist with the blending of the structure into the landscape. A couple of examples of gates. Gates I described earlier as horizontal bars mounted on a vertical frame. On the left is a gate enclosure blocking access to a horizontal shaft and made bat and wildlife friendly. On the right, the structure is a little bit different. It's a culvert with a bat and wildlife friendly gate. Not all of the proposed measures involve actual structures that have been built. And in the case of this slide, there's also the possibility of using polyurethane foam for plugging some of the mine openings. And on the left here, again at Cerrillos Hill State Park, polyurethane foam was used in the form of a plug with a drain pipe in the middle. And on the right-hand side is the finished product, the complete polyurethane foam closure with a beehive grate and concrete collar. And finally, as one other example of aesthetically pleasing structure that also meets the primary purpose of putting these structures in place, which is, again, to reduce or negate the risk for the public. And you do already have an example of that on Boston Hill in the southeastern corner of it. But some high-strength steel mesh can be used, put in place with rock anchors. And those structures are appropriate when you have a fairly large mine opening that is flush with the ground. So on the left, you have the mesh already in place, and the bridge abutments on two sides of the shaft opening. And those bridge abutments then serve for the installation of the bridge on the right-hand side of the slide. Again, aesthetically pleasing result with the completion of the safeguarding mine opening. And this is also from Cerrillos Hills State Park. And with this, this slide is the last one in our presentation. And so the rest of this public meeting is going to be for the rest of you for questions. And I'll turn the floor over to Sandra. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jean-Luc. Thank you all for those of you who have put questions into the queue. Lloyd, would you like to answer those verbally, or would you like to answer those separately? You can let me know later. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was muted. We can answer everything verbally if you want to open up people's mics and or their views on the screen. I don't.
Okay. So if you would like to answer a question, and we can do that verbally, go ahead and click the raise hand button on the bottom of your screen, and we'll just go in order.
I guess one last thing, if possible, I don't know if Chris can speak, but Chris Teskey, if you would like to just say a few words on behalf of the BLM and their interest in the project, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm on. Thank you, Lloyd. I just wanted to reiterate that there are major hazards out on Boston Hill that we do need to address, and that we have been trying to maintain the chain link fence for several years now. That keeps getting cut, and we were going up there every other week, but we haven't gone up there in quite a while. The private landowner has been going up and repairing that fence for us, but it just gets overwhelming at times. So I appreciate all the work you guys have done also. That's all I have.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Well, and I don't see anybody on the raising their hand yet, so I'll read the questions that we have put in the queue. Kendra Milligan asked, can we request the report on the cultural features? And then you guys also can click the Q&A and read all of this along with me if you want. And Lloyd, you already responded to that the report in its entirety is not available to the public. However, we are producing a historical overview popular report that will be distributed to the public.
Yeah, so there's both state and federal historic preservation laws that prevent us from distributing the entire report to the public, specifically to protect site locations and other cultural features on the landscape. However, Adam Oken is producing a pamphlet. It's about a 10-page pamphlet that's a historical overview of the district and discusses findings of the archaeological survey, and that is going to be made available to the public. Now we can share the archaeological report with the city of Silver City. I think Jamie had asked about that earlier. So some of the both the BLM and the city and the county would be able to receive copies of that. But the general public, we are producing an outreach pamphlet of Boston Hill. So, and Adam, I don't know if you want to say more about that, but.
I think that covers it. I wasn't sure if possibly AML wanted to think about producing a redacted version of the full cultural report that would have more details for people that were interested. I know that is something that can be done under the cultural resource laws that you were mentioning. We can't release the full report with all the locations, but there probably could be a redacted middle ground that could be created.
Yeah, and that's something we can work on for the public as well. And in addition to that, we haven't really spoken to it, but along with the mine safeguarding and reclamation, we are able to spend funding on interpretive measures such as signs and other things that the public could see out on Boston Hill. We've been working closely with Bat Conservation International. They've done some really incredible LiDAR underground mapping of some of the mine workings in the district. And so it's possible we might be able to do an interpretive display that would allow the public to see some of those underground workings based on that LiDAR imagery. So.
Great, thank you. And that, you guys already kind of answered Kendra's question that was listed in. Next, Jean-Luc, would you pull up the map, I think on the second slide? Joseph, sorry, I'm going to let you pronounce your own last name if you'd like to, asked, on the map, the southwest portion of the southernmost parcel of BLM land on Boston Hill is shown outside of the project area. Could you explain why this is? And I can annotate to kind of highlight what I think is being.
Yeah, I think this.
Yep, right in there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that BLM parcel is within the project area. I'm just not. I'm not sure if there's abandoned mine features on that particular parcel. I know that's where we drive through the gate. It's hard to see at this scale, but there's also areas on that southeastern portion of the district where the animal shelter is located that may not be within that hatched line. They had a large subsidence, and that is now also being added to the current Boston Hill project. Southeast side, I mean.
Thank you. Anne asked, and looks like Joseph just rose his hand, so hold on 1 minute, Joseph. In cataloging the mining features, did you consider opportunities for mining tourism on Boston Hill, places where tourists can get a view of what it was like to work underground and to work in a pit situation?
We definitely did consider that, and there are, as Lloyd spoke to a minute ago, a lot of those locations out there that are quite dramatic, and I think would be interesting to the public. And so there are opportunities, I think, for interpretive signs or trails that maybe go through some of these ways, some of these areas in a way that's a little safer than the trails currently go through the open space. Of course, we'd want to balance that with protecting the private properties that are in there, and finding the right balance that we've talked about. And Lloyd, you might have some other opinions or ideas to speak to on that.
Yeah, I think that would just be something, if the public's interested, if Silver City Open Space is interested, we can spend some funds on different types of interpretive signs or other measures. So I think that's just something we would talk about with city officials and members of the public prior to construction. So we put up several interpretive signs in the Cerritos Hills Historic Park. Some of those slides showed, the bridge and other features. We designed a lot of those features so the public could safely look into abandoned mine shafts and other mining features on the landscape. In Sugar Eat State Park in the northern part of the state by Raton, we have put up interpretive signs also with oral history recordings. You can push a button and hear from people that lived there in the past and their stories. So there's a lot we've done in the past, and so we're always open to whatever we could fund for interpretive measures. So.
Thank you both. I will I'll go ahead and Joseph, you can unmute yourself and give your question or public comment verbally.
Well, just going back to the project area boundary map, the area that of BLM land is not shown as being in the project area. I'm familiar with where that is. There are some underground features there. So if someone could get back to me with either a revised project boundary map or an explanation for why it's not in the project area, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Lloyd, would you like to follow up?
Yeah, I think we can get you that. It's just, you know, the colored lines and the dashed lines are hard for me to see at the scale, but I believe everything, that whole parcel was covered under Adam's survey. And if there are abandoned mine features on that parcel, they will be covered by this project. So I know there are features out there that have already been safeguarded in that parcel. The mesh net being one of them, I believe, and some other features that were backfilled in the past. But again, if there are mine features in that area, they would be covered by this project.
Great, thank you. Marcia asked, wanted to receive a public version of the cultural resources report, including the map of the findings. So would you just quickly, maybe this is an Adam question, maybe a Jean-Luc, reiterate how they can get a hold of the brochure and what the timeline is for public comment for the report, when they'll be able to see parts of the report for the public version?
So, you know, we're still in the process of consultations, both with the BLM and the State Historic Preservation Officer. And until that work is done, we're not going to release portions of the report. But like Adam said, there are sections of the report that can be redacted and given out to the public. And, you know, the brochure, we have the draft brochure right now that we're commenting on. But I would imagine it's going to be a couple of months before that information is available to the public. As far as the map, we can give a general project area map, but we will not provide a detailed map of all the feature locations.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then Marcia asked about an email address for commenting, and we showed that at the end, and it's the Jean-Luc's information is in the answers. If you guys have any other questions about that, you can let us know. And then Kendra asked, where is the construction / changes / being proposed, and is there a map specifically of those? And I think that's going to be part of the evaluation. Lloyd, did you want to elaborate?
The question is there a map of where the construction is going to occur?
Yes, I think so.
Well, it could occur throughout the entire open space. And as Jean-Luc mentioned earlier, this is a large project, and it would probably be done in several construction phases. A high priority for us would be to work on the north end of the Boston Hill Mining District to address the safety hazards at the Legal Tender and Globe mines. Currently, those are fenced with chain link fence, which has been breached multiple times. That's an extremely hazardous area of Boston Hill. And if we do this in phases, we would most likely be working on that northern end of the district first. Do you agree, Mike, or do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I also think there was a question about timing, and this will not happen quickly. You know, this NEPA process, we're trying to figure out what people prefer, what kind of closure methods or safeguarding methods is favored by the community. And once we get that kind of feedback and kind of get farther in this NEPA process, that's when we will start our design work. And so, you know, the engineering design and collaboration with the community will then proceed forward. Once we have a design, then we put it out for the lowest bid through the state procurement system. And, you know, we obtain a construction contractor, and we work through that process. And that's, you know, at that point, we would have a plan available to show everyone. And, be able to hit the ground running and with a construction contractor, but that's not going to happen for quite some time due to the process leading up to that. And one other thing about those closure examples that we showed, one thing we struggle with as a program is people really want to break into the structures we build. They want to get past whatever gate, whatever thing we're putting up as a roadblock to going underground and exploring the workings. And sometimes it doesn't need to be substantial because you would think people, it's not very dangerous or there's no reason to go past that. But you'd be surprised at the measures the public takes to breach some of our structures. And we try to make them as strong as possible but with still kind of making evident the historical nature of the workings behind them.
Yeah, I guess I would say in addition to that, as far as timing, I would imagine it's a guess, but it would most likely be the summer or fall of 2022 before there's construction going on in the district. So.
Thank you both. And thank you very much, Michael, for already answering Allison's question. And Joseph, if you have any other questions about the boundary, feel free to email Jean-Luc, or Lloyd's email is already also up here. At this time, does anyone else want to provide comment or a question? You can type it in the question and answer section, or you can use the raise your hand button. And while I'm giving you time to do that, thank you so much for joining us and spending your time with us. We really appreciate you being here, and we encourage you to provide public comment. Please do that if possible before March 25th so we can incorporate it in our report and use that information to respond accordingly. So please do that specifically to Joan Cartron. Oh, we have two. Great. All right. Well, Jeffrey, go ahead and unmute and provide your comment.
I was wondering when that Cerrillos project was done, and also who I might talk to about that particular abandoned mine project.
I didn't quite catch the question. Are you asking which construction contractor worked on that?
No, I'm asking when the project happened.
What year was that, Lloyd?
Yeah, that work was completed in 2001 and 2002. Santa Fe County purchased 1,100 acres of open space in the Cerrillos Hills, and we did the closures for the most part in 2002. And because it was going to become a historic park, we did close several features with high tensile string steel mesh so people could safely view into the mine shafts. We did a lot of polyurethane foam puff closures. We did what we could to leave the historic landscape intact. So anywhere you walked on trails, you would still see the waste piles and other mining features. When you walked upon them, then they were closed with structures that just weren't visible from a distance or trails. So
that looked pretty neat. So it's a county-owned property, is that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Now it's a state park.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but it's still county-owned. So yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Chris Teskey. I just wanted to add, Cerrillos Hills was many phases, though. I mean,
Yeah.
what shown was only a part of it. I mean, I can't remember way back. I think there were some even before 2000s that projects were done up there.
Yeah, so there were more than 1,000 mining features in the district, and our programs probably safeguarded about 500 of those features between 1990 and now. So. And those phases are, a lot of that's based on land ownership, We took care of the big public parcels. We've been working with Chris Teskey and the BLM to cover BLM land in the Cerrillos Hills. And then we have a lot of private landowners that have a patented mining property that want us to come safeguard features on their land. So.
Thank you very much. Bob, go ahead and unmute and provide your question or comment.
Yeah, this is Bob Chywitz with the Town Open Space Committee. Two questions. The first is the narrow gauge railroad runs through most of that area, except the portions that were removed by all the historic mining. Did that get fully recorded along with all the excellent features there? And the second question is, what is the proposed access route to do all of the construction work at the Globe and the Legal Tender Mine? The town has just spent a lot of money on a number of trails that used to be the access road from the south to the Legal Tender. So we're interested in finding out what might be happening with that.
Adam, do you want to answer that first question?
Yeah, we did in fact document the railroad, which was, I believe, constructed in 1906, if I remember. That was the line that went to Pinos Altos. It kind of winds through the district. As you noted, it is kind of segmented. There are some parts that have been destroyed, some parts that are missing, but the earthen grade is still visible for fairly long stretches, and other parts of it have just become trails or roads. But we did document that. There's also a little bit of a spur line or a second line that comes off at a short segment that we documented as well. And we did document several features along the main railroad grade, some historic concrete culverts and some other landscape scale features that were associated with the railroad. So those are some of the features that are in our report.
And Bob, could you just ask that second question again? You were wondering about construction access.
Well, I'd like to follow up on the railroad a little bit. I'm wondering if they consulted with Dwayne Erickson, who wrote a book about the narrow gauge railroad. He and I GPSed the entire route through there over a decade ago.
I have seen that document. We didn't speak with him though, no.
Well, he's got a lot of original photographs and information on that. And I believe he's a BLM archaeologist in Oregon there.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be interesting. We did find a few historic photos of the railroad that are I think we found those in the Palace of Governors archives in Santa Fe. But yeah, it was a pretty short-lived railroad. I think it was abandoned by 1909 or 1911, and the tracks were pulled up pretty quick. But it's definitely an interesting feature.
Okay, and on the access road to the Legal Tender Mine, I'm just interested if the route from the bypass road, probably from the gate that you mostly go in to access Boston Hill, from the south end up over the top of the hill and into the Legal Tender, if that's supposed to be the main construction access route, or if the landowner has granted access from his side, which is a lot shorter access.
Yes, we do have access from the landowner, but we probably would be using that main road that you enter from the south. One of the good things about Boston Hill, there are existing roads throughout the district, so it makes access to mining features pretty easy without disturbing the landscape. If we do go off-road, say if we were to backfill a mine shaft or a feature, it's usually one trip in and out, and there would be a flagged access route to that feature and back. But we are planning to use roads and trails whenever possible for construction access.
Okay, and so would you consult with the city if you're gonna be bringing in heavy equipment across existing trails in terms of how to rehab them?
Yes, and the other issue with the, I mean, depending on what we're going to do at certain features, we can specify the size of equipment. We try to use the smallest equipment possible, but it depends on what's being built. But, once we get closer, once we have some engineering design work and we get closer to the construction phase, we'll consult with the city and others to go over project access and timing and the types of equipment and other work that could happen in the area. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. It looks like I don't have anyone else who has their hand raised at this point, and no other questions in the Q&A queue. So with that, is there any last words from our panelists before we sign off?
Well, again, we want to thank everybody who attended the meeting, and we look forward to working with the public for this project. Thank you.
And we really do want to hear from you. And the earlier the better. It helps our process to get the feedback now rather than when the design is underway or even completed. So it would be really good to know what people, the key concerns like the access that we just heard about. Those are really good things to get as far as feedback at this point in time. And we look forward to hopefully doing a successful project and working well with the trail users and the town and everyone else involved.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for everybody that attended. And again, if you have questions, send us an email. And as Mike said, the earlier the better, and as many questions as you might have about the project. But as we go forward, we're more than happy to work with everybody and listen to public and private concerns regarding this project. So.
Thank you all for joining us. And please let us know your concerns. We really appreciate the time you took this evening, and we wish you all well. Have a great evening.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.